Hi everyone, it's Sarah from Knitwestern. Today I'm going to talk about ribbing and I'm going to explain what different stitch patterns are. So you can see, again, I'm all set up, ready to go with my cast on row. So today I'm going to teach you a 1x1 rib, which basically just means I'm going to knit a stitch, purl a stitch, knit a stitch, purl a stitch, and so on. There's lots of ways you can rib. Some patterns might call for 2x2, or you need to do 2 purls and a knit, or 2 knits and a purl. It just depends on the pattern. So make sure that you pay attention if you're following a pattern that has something other than what I'm showing you here. So all we're going to do first, we're going to start with knit. We're going to go into the back of the stitch, wrap around from the left over to the right. Keeping a hand on our yarn, we're going to pull our right needle down towards us, come up in the front, and slide that stitch off the left needle. Now, in order to purl, we have to remember that we need the yarn to be in the front. So right now it's in the back. We're just going to move it to the front. So just bring it between the tips of your 2 needles, just like I've done. Again, you can just see that. Just bringing it in between. And what we're going to do is come up in the front, wrap from the right around the back of the right needle to the left side. Holding onto our yarn, we're going to pull down and go through to the back of the left needle and pull off. So now it's time to knit again, which means that we need to move our yarn back to the back of the needle. So we're just going to slide it back over. Now it's in the back. We're ready to go. We're going to go into the back to knit, wrap it around, bring our needle forward, and push our stitch off. Time to purl, bring it back forward. Now it's in the front, we're ready to go. Slide our needle into the front, wrap around, push it through to the back, push it off. Again, it's time to knit. One last time, we're going to push it to the back. Now we're going to enter the back of the stitch. Yarn goes around, going to come up in the front, push it off, and our last stitch is a purl, so once again we need to bring that yarn to the front, enter in the front, wrap around, and push our needle to the back, and then off. So ribbing is really cool because it can show you the different textures between the stitches. So since this is our first row, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can tell that there are some bumps that look very flat. They're parallel to the left needle. And there are some that look more like holes. They're kind of like, they look more like V's when they're in a long row, but right now it's a little bit hard to see. So what we know from our pattern that it's knitting, so it's always going to be a knit first, but you can also learn how to read your knitting. And so if you see something that looks like this, that means that's a purl stitch. So if you want it to match up, you need to do another purl on top of it. So I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to knit. And then we're going to purl, making sure that our yarn comes to the front before we do that. And back to knitting. Purls our front. Knitting again, so yarn's in the back. And finally we purl. So this is how to make the ribbing pattern 1x1, like I said. So that means just 1 knit and 1 purl stitch next to each other, and you repeat that over and over. There's also ways that we can make different patterns if we pay attention to how we're combining knits and purls in the individual rows themselves. So like we've just seen, if you combine knitting and purling in the same row, you're going to get something that looks like this. If you do a row of knitting and a row of purling, you get something that's called stockinette stitch, and that curls up at the end. It's kind of like when your sweater curls on the bottom or the cuffs. if you aren't careful with it. And it doesn't have this stretchy ribbing part to hold it flat. You can also just do all knitting, and that's called garter stitch. And it actually looks the same as if you only do purls, just if you flip the fabric over. So there you have it. That's how to do ribbing. Thanks for joining me.